Hi, this is Ed Helvey, founder of Montclair State Radio way back in 1966. And you're listening to 90.3 FM WMSC, Upper Montclair, New Jersey. Still the voice of Montclair State.
Makes you feel happy like an old-time movie. I'll tell you about the magic and the free your soul, but it's like $90.
All right, 20 minutes past the 3 o'clock hour here on SMC Sports, WMSC. Sean McChesney, Tom Davis in the studio. Now on the phone, we have the host of the Sports Zone on 710 WOR Radio, Pete McCarthy. Pete, you're on SMC Sports. What's going on?
Yeah, everything's good. Did a little walk in Midtown, walking down to work in Manhattan. Everything's going well.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you very much for agreeing to the interview. I appreciate it. Just before we get into things, I just kind of wanted to get a little background on yourself. You know, I understand you are about a year in with WOR. You've been with SNY. Just give me a little background on your career as well as where you are and where you see yourself going.
Yeah, I started up at WOR opening day of last year, so a little over a year now. It's been going well. It's been fun, and talk a lot of Mets. I don't think you're going to get any more Mets talk in New York than what we give you on the Sports Zone after the games, and Mets on deck prior to the games an hour before first pitch. So it's been great. As far as my background, I was at MLB.com for 8-9 years, and before that, went to school at Hofstra doing the college radio thing like you guys are, and just dedicated as much time as possible in college to doing that, trying to get better on air and, find that first opportunity. And I was lucky enough to find it at MLB.com. So, a little background on me.
That's actually pretty impressive, and just like with your experience with WOR, you do host the Sports Zone. I've actually had a few opportunities to listen to it. It's a very good show. And I've also noticed you are with Mets on deck as well, so I know that'll be probably the topic of discussion. First question I have for you is dealing with the Mets bullpen. Now, a few weeks ago, I thought if David Wright's injury were to go long-term, maybe you go after a shortstop or a third baseman. But now I feel like the issue now is with the bullpen after the first few games I saw. One of them being against Atlanta on Saturday. I was actually in attendance for it. DeGrom gets them a lead, and then the bullpen just, blows everything. Blows everything out of proportion. They ended up losing the game. Where do you think the Mets' number one issue is if they had to go for a trade?
I think it's offense. I think that if they can add another bat to that lineup, that's the first place you look. If you can, bring in a shortstop and move Flores or, Ben Zobrist type, that versatile player that can play a number of different spots for you. That way you're covered if David Wright comes back, and if he doesn't. I still think that's the number one need for this team, despite the fact the offense has picked it up over the last few days. As far as the bullpen goes, every team in baseball could use another arm in the pen. There's no doubt about that. And we know, once you get to October, what wins games for you. And, in recent years, it's been that bullpen. But the Mets do have, quite a few interesting arms coming back. They're going to have Henry Mejia coming back from suspension in 3 weeks or so. And I don't think there's any reason to think that Henry Mejia won't be as effective as he was last year, now in a setup role rather than closing. I think Jared Familia certainly anchored that down, having an all-star-like season. Jerry Blevins to be coming back from injury as well. Bobby Parnell got through 5 outs yesterday. It's not the same Bobby Parnell we saw pre-neck surgery and Tommy John surgery, but he was able to get out yesterday against a tough lineup. So, it remains to be seen what kind of role he can play. But I think that they can get through with this 10. And the other wild card is they have to manage the innings of so many of these starters, and they're just really trying to figure out how to do that. One of the options that's been thrown around is eventually putting Noah Syndergaard in the pen, and Syndergaard's stuff would play unbelievably in the bullpen. He'd be a great setup man. I think that's only something you do in September if you're in the race, but if the Mets are in that situation, I think that they can get by with the arms that they have, but they do need some help in that lineup.
Yeah, I do agree that if David Wright's injury does go long-term, there might need to be a trade made, to kind of get the Mets through September and possibly, hopefully, into October. But now, speaking at a possible trade, Dylan G designated for assignment, John Neese, there's been talk about that. Can you see a trade with G or Neese, or maybe both of them happening in the very near future?
I think the Mets would love to trade G. I think that's been the case for months, but they haven't found a taker really for him. At this point, if a team is willing to take the salary off the books, the Mets would probably go for that. But you know what? Dylan G going down to the minor leagues and having him as an insurance policy in case they need a starter later if someone goes down, if they run out of innings for some of these youngsters in the rotation. You always need depth in starting pitching. So I'm sure if G went down in the minor league, he could figure things out a little bit. Remember, he's a command pitcher, and you got to be in some kind of rhythm to be effective if that's the way you are, and you're not, just throwing it past guys and blowing away with your stuff. So it wasn't long ago that G was a solid big league pitcher, and I don't think it'll take too much for him to get back to that level. So does he get dealt? I'm not sure. I think that'll be really interesting to see over the course of the next few days. And as far as John Neese goes, I was kind of of the opinion that Neese would be pitching for his job tonight in Toronto, and Steven Matz would come up if he got hit around. But I think now, with all the innings that they're trying to manage here, they have to keep John Neese in that rotation. And, if you're going to move Syndergaard to the pen eventually, well, you could bring up Matz at that point and have him roll through. But they really have an innings crunch with the rotation, and that's not something they're going to back off from. They have numbers on all these guys. So I think that they need Neese to stick around in this rotation and figure out whatever's ailing him. But, man, tonight's a real tough start for him. The Blue Jays just mashed lefties, and they're one of the best hitting teams in baseball. They're phenomenal at home, and could be a little different story than we saw the first two games of the series tonight.
Yeah, the Mets squeaked out 2 wins at Citi Field against Toronto. Probably one of the hottest teams in baseball right now. Now the Mets shift up to Toronto tonight. And you're right, they're one of the best hitting teams in baseball. They do very well against lefties, which puts John Neese at a big disadvantage tonight. But, my next question actually for you was about Steven Matz. He's tearing it up in AAA, but there's not necessarily a lot of room for him in the Mets organization right now when it comes to being in the MLB. In your opinion, when can you see Steven Matz wearing a New York Mets uniform?
I think what makes the most sense right now, and obviously, listen, he's like their 4th or 5th best pitcher right now if he came up, but they have to save his innings too, and it's kind of a weird situation that they're in. But I think what they'd like to do, and we'll see if Neese supports them, that by pitching well enough over the next tonight and perhaps beyond. But I think they'd like to have Matt be, a spot starter, pop in early July when they play. I believe it's 10 days in a row. He could get one of those, and then maybe after the All-Star break, start to become more of a regular fixture in the rotation. But I think he'll probably bounce around a little bit, and then come August when, Syndergaard is pushed to the pen, they'll, move Matt to the rotation. But, as we know, guys go down all the time. Somebody's bound to get injured, and I'm sure an opportunity will open up for Matt sooner than that kind of plan would allow. But the dude's ready. I don't think there's any question about it. He's killing it down there at AAA. And you look at Syndergaard and what he did at AAA last year, he had an ERA over 5. It's tough to pitch in Las Vegas. It's tough to pitch the Pacific Coast League. And Matt's killing it. He's got an ERA around 2.
Absolutely, and I personally believe as well Matz is ready to come up. And now kind of shifting away from the Mets a little bit because there's been a lot of controversy in the MLB over the last few days. One of the biggest ones, obviously, the news that broke yesterday. Cardinals are being investigated by the FBI for apparently hacking into the Houston Astros databases. I guess it was just taking away strategies, stuff like that. I don't really know the full story because there's still a lot more information that has to come into fruition. But just going off what you have heard about the story, what is your take on this story?
It's a 2015 controversy, huh? I mean, in the NFL, they're taking air out of footballs. In Major League Baseball, they got corporate espionage and hacking computer systems and all that kind of thing. I think one thing that I'm not sure people are wrapping their heads around fully is, this isn't the Cardinals just, look at the Astros and how they do things. We got to find out about it and bust into their system. There's, the general manager of the Houston Astros is Jeff Luhnow, who was in the St. Louis Cardinals organization as their scouting director for many years. And, he brought along with him some of the Cardinals database, I believe. And, apparently some Cardinals employees were able to use some old passwords that Luhnow used back in his days with the Cardinals and gained access to the account. Now, what we don't know is what they did with that information, if it was used for any baseball decision making. The kind of things that are there are trade discussions that the Astros had with other teams. Scouting reports on players, surely amateurs and guys that they would have liked in an upcoming draft. But I think what's interesting about it is if you were going to use that kind of information to gain a competitive advantage on the other 29 teams in baseball, and most specifically the Houston Astros, you wouldn't post it all on, anonbin.com. You wouldn't throw it up on a website, and that's when it became public, over a year ago, I believe, that, all this information got out. If you were using it for, evil purposes, you would keep it quiet and not do something like that. So, I'm as curious as anyone else to find out how far up the ladder this goes with the Cardinals. Is it just a low-level employee that gained access, and I don't know why they would put it on some third-party situation, but, like I said, it's definitely a 2015 kind of controversy. It's not stealing signs any longer. It's not that form of gamesmanship now. Extensive front offices and sensitive information.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point with the NFL now being investigated for Deflategate and the MLB now investigating with this whole thing. I'm curious to see what the NBA does tomorrow.
The FBI is investigating the Cardinals. The NFL was able to handle everything in-house. Major League Baseball, it's much different when they can't control and the government's involved.
Exactly, and that's a very serious situation. But now another controversial topic which the FBI has fortunately stayed away from is Kansas City Royals will have 8 representatives as of right now starting the All-Star game. Now, in my personal belief, in 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks when the voting is over, if this situation stays the same, there's going to be a lot of decisions that the MLB has to make. What is your take on the Kansas City Royals, and what do you think the MLB is likely to do if the voting ends and this is the way it's going to be?
Omar Infante doesn't deserve to start an All-Star game, hitting 180 or whatever he's at right now. This kind of thing happened way back when, I think in the 50s, with the Cincinnati Reds, and a bunch of Reds were voted to the All-Star game, and then Major League Baseball basically took away the votes from the fans for a period of time before going back to it. It's fascinating. If you have a system like this that is, voting and you don't see any kind of, supercomputer that's putting in all of these votes for the Kansas City Royals, and it's just a fan base that, loves their team enough and is committed enough to this that they're doing it. I mean, surely these guys don't deserve to start the All-Star game, but, this is the system that you have in place. And, I think Major League Baseball has kind of gotten away from the spirit of the All-Star game over the years anyway by allowing the individual teams to really campaign on their players' behalf. I mean, if you watch a Tigers game, in the background behind home plate on the wall there, it says vote Miggy to the All-Star game. And, the Royals, they push all season long, vote Royals into the All-Star game, and that's what their fans are going to do. Mm-hmm. I think they should probably focus a little bit more on the individual teams and say, listen, pump the All-Star voting, but don't necessarily just pimp your own guys, promote popular players in the sport. But, as long as these organizations have something to gain, like 8 All-Stars, Royals will keep on doing it. And, I wouldn't support Major League Baseball going in and saying, no way Omar Infante could be a starter. But the fans want, so they voted for.
Absolutely, and I totally agree, and we said it multiple times on the show earlier today. Ned Yost said it perfectly a week ago. He said, if you don't like it, go vote. And, that's exactly what the MLB, I believe, that's exactly what fan voting is. Go vote your favorites in. Go vote the guys that you want into the All-Star game. And a friend of ours actually just said something very interesting earlier, saying that with this being addressed now that 8 Kansas City Royals are leading contributors to start the All-Star game, it is showing that baseball, fandom is, declining a little bit. What's your take on that?
I don't really buy that. I think, obviously the popularity of the Royals has grown significantly, but I think what you've seen is, baseball's become more regional. People care about their team, and they're not necessarily going to watch Sunday Night Baseball, whereas in the NFL, you're going to watch Sunday Night Football. In the NBA, LeBron's playing on Sunday afternoon, you're going to watch that game. And, there just aren't as many baseball fans that are willing to say, hey, Mike Trout's playing on Sunday night. I'm going to watch that if their team isn't involved. And I think that's part of what you see with, the All-Star voting and apparently the Royals fans being so dedicated to, their own team. But, remember, too, these guys don't have to play a full game or anything like that. For the guys that really don't deserve to start, they could play an inning. There's 80 All-Stars on each team at this point anyway, so I'm sure they'll have more than enough reserves to, get through the All-Star game and have it still mean whatever it means with home field advantage on the line.
I totally agree. I think it's a situation that the MLB is kind of like blowing out of proportion a little bit. Fans have the right to vote, and if they want to vote, they can. If they don't, then they don't have to. But it's definitely a situation where, the American League is going to have to act, and I feel like, they will, despite the fact of that. But now I kind of want to switch sports a little bit, before I let you go to the NBA Finals. I thought LeBron had a great series, but at the end of the day, wasn't enough. Iggy won the MVP award last night. Just give me your thoughts. Did you think that LeBron put up enough numbers to win the MVP, or did you think at the end of the day it should have went to the winning team like it did?
Well, I thought LeBron had a chance, if only because, who really jumped out at you on the Golden State Warriors? And, Andre Iguodala ended up winning the MVP, but LeBron was scoring 40 points a game while being defended by Iguodala through that series. But, it's fine with me. I don't get too wrapped up in who wins the MVP and all that kind of thing. I think when you step back and look at what LeBron accomplished over the last month or two, even though he didn't win the finals, and even though last night he goes on and says, is it worth it to lose in the finals rather than just not making the playoffs? And he seemed to side with he'd prefer just to not make the playoffs than end up having the heartbreak of losing in the finals and putting his body through all that. I think this is really one of the crowning achievements of his career to this point, and maybe ultimately be one of the things we remember most about LeBron, more so than whatever championships might be in the future and are in the past, that he was able to will, essentially, an awful team around him once Kyrie and Love went down to within 2 games of winning the NBA Finals. And it's really unbelievable effort. He did everything for that team. He led both the Warriors and the Cavaliers in points per game, rebounds per game, and assists per game. It's unbelievable. And that was the kind of effort that the Cavs needed just to, even stay competitive in that series against Golden State. But, I just think, forget about the MVP and awards and all that kind of stuff. I think it's just one of those things you really got to shake your head and have some respect for what LeBron was able to accomplish.
Absolutely, and LeBron had a great series, but at the end of the day, they decided MVP should go to the winning team, and that's the way they went. Pete, before I let you go, just if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners when they can listen to the Sports Zone tonight.
Yeah, I'll be on in a little more than 2 hours, 6:05. It'll be Mets on deck as gets ready for the Mets and Blue Jays up in Toronto. We'll be giving away some Mets tickets, so be sure to listen in 7:10 a.m. or if you want to listen online, WOR.com/listen. And then after the game, take phone calls and go until midnight with the Sports Zone, give away some more tickets then. So that's the plan for tonight. That's how I usually roll.
Very nice, Pete. I appreciate you coming on the show and giving us your insight. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot for having me. Keep up the good work there. And college radio, man, it's one of the highlights, one of the most fun I had in life. So make sure you guys enjoy it all and have a good time doing it.
Yeah, we're definitely having a lot of fun. I've been with this station for a little over a year. It's been fun. Thank you very much, Pete.
Awesome. All right, be good, guys.
All right, you too.
You too.